The story continues, and we see that Cha Yeren is being questioned by the media about her father. The media asks about how Yeren's father passed away and his body being found near a mountain. They also talk about how it is being has said that it is assumed by the police that it was a case of Mr. Cha taking his own life, and asks Cha Yeren if she agrees with that assessment from the police. Yeren doesn't really have anything to say as she is traumatized beyond limits, so she stays quiet, but the people of the media keep forcing questions in to keep asking her. They ask her about how the body's condition was, as it is assumed that the body had passed away about a month ago, and they ask what Yeren feels about all this. As Yeren stays quiet under pressure, we see that Mr. Suk has arrived to the scene with a bucket of water in his hands. Mr. Suk then goes on to berate the news media and the reporters for forcing all these things on an already depressed girl. Mr. Suk questions their humanity before throwing the water from the bucket on to everyone. Damaging their equipments, he tells them to get lost. We then learn that Yeren's father's body was found in the Ummyeong Mountains. His body was left hanging under a tree with a will placed underneath his feet. The police has assumed that Mr. Cha took away his own life because of the immense pressure and torture by the gangsters who were messing with him. Further investigation and reports have started that he had passed away in the month of April. We then see that a funeral is being held by Mr. Suk and Cha Yeren for Mr. Cha, and Mr. Suk thinks about how he was the one who single-handedly prepared the funeral of his own father. However, as he looks around and sees how not a single person was there, he understands that this is a very lonely time for Yeren. Yeren then speaks up, asking Mr. Suk if he feels the loneliness. She further goes on to add that this is what happens to a businessman once his business fails. We then see a flashback where we see that Mr. Cha is very enthusiastic about a work project, and he promises someone to build them an apartment as soon as possible. The person then asks Cha to join him for dinner. However, Cha refuses, stating that he has a date with his daughter. Back in the current time, Yeren talks about how despite being a businessman, her father never neglected her and always put her as the first priority, and maybe that caused him a lot of trouble in his work life. However, never once did he regret doing so. However, whenever he did get work, it was special because he would commit himself working all the time for it. Just like that, Mr. Cha got the deal to make the apartment, and Yeren says that it ruined her entire family's life forever. We then see another flashback, where a young Cha Yeren is on the phone with her father, and she tells him that she is bringing lunch for him at work, to which Mr. Cha tells her not to, saying he has already ate. Yeren tells him that it's fine, but she's going to bring it anyway, and he can consume it for snacks later. However, Mr. Cha keeps telling her not to come anywhere near his workplace and stay where she is. However, by that time Yeren had already almost reached him, and upon reaching there, what she says there leaves her shocked, as she sees a bunch of gangsters beating up everyone at her father's office. She also notices that her own father was being beat up by a gangster. However, he was still trying to contact her in the phone, but this angers the gangster, as he beats up Mr. Cha even more, saying that it's disrespectful of him to pick a call during an important meeting between them. We then see the gangsters telling the people of the company that they should either finish him off or leave the job, otherwise they won't be leaving. We then learn that the gangsters pretend to be normal citizens during these problems to stay out of trouble. Seeing all this happening in front of her, Cha Yeren was left traumatized. However, this continued for the next 3 years. We see Mr. Cha begging to the person in charge of handling these things to give him 3 or even 2 months more time, and that he will get the job done. However, the person says that these things are no longer in his hands, and that there is nothing he can do to change the mind of the people in power, and informs Mr. Cha that it was over. Then, because he couldn't complete the job, the company sued Mr. Cha, and his building company went bankrupt and they hit a financial low, so they had to move out from their usual home to a rundown place. When they were moving away, Yeren noticed that the building her father was working in was already completed, so she understood that it only meant that the company were in cahoots with the gangsters to get this done as cheaply. In exchange, the company sold their loan to the gangster, so now the gangsters would bother her father for money. And it was then that her father lost all feelings to move forward in life. Back to the current time, Yeren says that she constantly asked her father about what that company was about, but he never told her about it, and this made her hate him. But she now understands that he only did it to protect her, and it's because of her rough behavior that pushed him to take his life, so she should be blamed for it. Saying this, Yeren starts crying out. Mr. Suk is sad seeing Yeren in this state, and wonders why is it always that the victims suffer and the ones who actually caused it get away with it. Just then we see someone coming to pay respect to Mr. Cha, and he does so. After paying his respects, the person is about to leave, and before leaving, he tells Cha Yeren that she is still so young, so it is even more saddening than normal. We see that he is wearing the same smartwatch as the person who used to work with Mr. Cha. He then introduces himself as someone who used to work with her father, named Kim Min-hyuk of the Daeun Group, the CEO from before. We then see that the name Daeun Group rings a bell for Cha Yeren. Later on, we see Kim Min-hyuk, Mr. Suk and Yeren seated together, and Yeren asks Min-hyuk if her father really worked for such a big company like Daeun Group, who are known to build state-of-the-art hotels and resorts. Kim Min-hyuk says that he had worked with Yeren's father a long time ago, back when he was still just a normal manager on a project for the Daeun constructions. Min-hyuk further says that Yeren's father bad exceeded their expectations by a lot, and thanks to that, he managed to be promoted to director thanks to the extraordinary performance of Mr. Cha, which is why he always wanted to meet him and thank him for everything. However, he never expected that this would be the way that he will end up meeting him again. Min-hyuk says that he heard a lot about Cha Yeren from Mr. Cha. Mr. Cha always talked about Yeren with a smile, and always put her as the first priority when it came to everything. We then get to learn that it was Kim Min-hyuk's invitation which Mr. Kim had rejected years ago to take out his daughter on a date. Min-hyuk continues, saying that it is because of his immense love for his daughter that makes it even hard for him to believe that Mr. Cha would just suddenly leave the world one day, and not to mention he would leave by taking his own life. He says this with a slightly taunting vibe, which stings Cha Yeren. Min-hyuk then puts his hand inside his suit to bring out an envelope, which he puts on the table and tells Cha Yeren that he wishes the best for her before getting up and taking his leave. As Min-hyuk is leaving, Yeren opens the envelope which he had left for her, and sees that it includes a check worth 50 million Korean won. Seeing this, Cha Yeren calls out to Min-hyuk, telling him to stop. Min-hyuk stops and turns back, and Yeren tells him that she wants to return the envelope to him. Yeren says that while she is grateful that he wants to help her out in her current dire situation, the amount which he is giving off to her is too large an amount and it will be too burdensome for her, which is why she wants to return it, saying that she will be taking care of her own problems and that she doesn't want to live under anyone else's debts. Min-hyuk gets serious hearing this from Yeren, and asks her why would she be considering this as living under someone's debt. Min-hyuk says that the victims of such tragedies should try to be compensated as much as possible. Meanwhile, the criminals should pay for their crimes and should be punished. However, with how fickle the society is, it always makes the victims suffer more and more pain for no reason whatsoever. Hearing this, Mr. Suk seems touched, as he had the exam thought not long ago. Min-hyuk continues by saying that as he was a part of the adults who build this society, he is just making up for his own faults by giving her the money. Min-hyuk then bows down and tells Cha Yeren to please accept the money from him. We then see that Min-hyuk is leaving. However, before he leaves, Min-hyuk takes a good look at Mr. Suk, before finally leaving. Mr. Suk also thinks of him with a lot of curiosity, with his name being a key point of interest to him. We then see that Kim Min-hyuk is in his car, sitting beside his secretary, Ms. Jo. There, Ms. Jo tells Min-hyuk that it doesn't look like to her that he was beaten up or had any water thrown at him, which means that Mr. Cha didn't hand over those important documents to Cha Yeren, because if he had done so, then Min-hyuk would have gotten involved and those things would have happened to him. Min-hyuk says that it was as expected. There was no reason for Mr. Cha to hand it over to Cha Yeren and out his own daughter's well-being into danger. Secretary Jo then asks Min-hyuk what was even his reason to go out to the funeral then. Min-hyuk then answers in a cold tone, saying that there is just something about being able to help the family, that he himself destroyed, the feeling that makes him feel so superior that he can't quite put into words for her to understand. Secretary Jo says that there must be definitely more to it than just that, as Min-hyuk definitely also would have wanted to meet Suk Suk-hwan. Just at that moment, Mr. Suk himself came in front of Min-hyuk's car to force stop it. The driver gets mad at him for doing so, but Mr. Suk ignores that and goes to meet Kim Min-hyuk. Mr. Suk asks Min-hyuk about what he said about punishing the criminals, because there is one such criminal that Mr. Suk knows of that needs to be punished no matter what, and Mr. Suk wants his help in punishing that guy. Min-hyuk is a bit overwhelmed. Even though he is face to face with Mr. Suk, he can't help but feel awkward knowing that Suk has the ability to come back to life every time he is finished off. Min-hyuk then tells Mr. Suk to get inside his car. After that, Min-hyuk wonders if he should check if the ability of Mr. Suk is real by finishing him off by himself. We then see that Min-hyuk, Secretary Jo and Mr. Suk have made it to a luxurious hotel bar. Upon arriving there, Mr. Suk asks just what kind of place have they come to and why, and Min Hyuk responded to that by saying that this is one of the bars owned by the Daeun group, and that he made a reservation beforehand so that they can talk freely. Then they all sit down, and Min Hyuk asks Mr. Suk to tell him about that person who he said needs to be punished at all costs. Mr. Suk then tells Kim Min Hyuk about everything that happened with Mr. Cha and Cha Yerin from the beginning. Min Hyuk listens to this and says that it's really shameful that they had to go through these, and reconfirms that if the person who did this was the one who Mr. Suk wants to punish, to which Suk says yes. Mr. Suk then asks Min Hyuk if he has any idea of who could have done that sort of thing to Mr. Cha, because after all, they've worked together before in the past. This leads to a moment of awkward silence between them all, as Min Hyuk doesn't know what to say regarding this topic. Mr. Suk then takes a sip of the drink in hand and says that the only reason he is asking them this is because they are in the same line of business, so maybe they're aware of some rumors that can connect to this. Mr. Suk then suddenly flusters as he realizes just how good the alcohol he just drank is, and he asks the bartender what is the name of the drink, to which the bartender tells him that it's a 1964 bicentenary, which is a type of whiskey which is sold for 320,000 won per cup. This shocks Mr. Suk as he can't believe that such a drink, which is more expensive than his rent, can exist. Mr. Suk then realizes that he is behaving inappropriately and apologizes to Min Hyuk, saying that he got carried away by the drink. Min Hyuk ignores this and instead continues on by saying that it's very common for companies to hire gangsters to keep the construction dealers in their toes. It is more common than most people think, and that they mostly do it so that they can get their building built for the least amount of money possible. However, he adds that in case of Cha Yerin and her family, it seems like the stuff was even worse because it seems like the gangsters were involved from the very beginning. Min Hyuk then grins and says that he has a company in mind, but he first wants to ask Mr. Suk just what would he do if he found out who did it. Mr. Suk is confused by this as the answer is obvious to him. He says that he will crush everyone in that company for doing what they did. Min Hyuk then speaks up and says that it's best for him to not meddle with those people, because they're extremely rich and hold incredible influence everywhere, and for them, the gangsters are willing to do anything. Min Hyuk further adds that while what happened to Cha Yerin's father is sad, but if a normal guy like Suk tries to mess with them, it will do no good, and will bring forth even more problems for them. Mr. Suk doesn't like this and asks Min Hyuk about the stuff he said to Cha Yerin then, the stuff about unfairness towards the victims, and Min Hyuk replies to this by saying that he said it to her that way because Yerin is a student, she doesn't know about how the world operates. He didn't want to tell the bitter truth to a high school kid. However, Mr. Suk is an adult, so he should definitely understand this better. Mr. Suk scoffs at this and says that Min Hyuk is a lot different from what he had thought of him as, and Min Hyuk replies by saying that Suk is a lot different to what he had hoped as well. We then see Mr. Suk getting mad and asking the bartender to change his drink with a cheaper drink in soju, as the expensive stuff doesn't fit him at all. He then takes the entire bottle of soju and gulps it down, before telling Min Hyuk that the people who harmed Yerin are probably feeling the same. They have money, they have influence, so of course they'll be able to crush a normal man who drinks soju. Mr. Suk then asks Min Hyuk if knowing people like that exist disgust him. Mr. Suk then gets up and walks away, saying that Min Hyuk doesn't need to tell him who he thinks did it, and that he will find them himself and that he will find them quick and beat them up, because he can't go to sleep while being this mad. Min Hyuk then speaks up and tauntingly says that it won't be easy to beat them up like how it was easy to beat up the Jinhwan Corps. This shocks Suk Hwan, as he doesn't understand how Min Hyuk knows about all this. Right then, Secretary Joe gets out a blade and chops down the back of the neck of Suk, which takes him down, and a pool of blood forms. Min Hyuk tells Suk Hwan that no such thing as unfair exists in this world and that it all depends on who is strong and who is weak, and that Cha Hyung Suk didn't know that, which is why he lost his life. This leaves Mr. Suk baffled, and he asks Min Hyuk what he means, to which Min Hyuk replies by saying that he was the one who took the life of Cha Yerin's father. He says that he did that not because of the apartment construction, nor was it because of him understanding that he hired gangsters. Nope, if that was the case he would have let him go. He took his life because he knew something very important, something he shouldn't have known. Kim Min Hyuk then asks Mr. Suk Hwan if he would like to know what that important thing did Cha Hyung Suk figured out before he was finished off for good. As Kim Min Hyuk is about to elaborate on this topic, Mr. Suk tells him that he doesn't care about all that, and that what matters is that Min Hyuk was the one who took Mr. Cha's life. Min Hyuk says that it's true that he did, but it was all the fault of Cha Hyung Suk, because if only he had just known his role and kept his mouth shut, he would have been spared with his life. Instead, he tried to do something that he could never handle, and it cost him his life, and it almost cost Cha Yeren her life too. Mr. Suk was seething in anger as he heard this, but he didn't have the necessary strength to pull off anything after being slashed by a knife. Min Hyuk continued, saying that Cha Hyung Suk did all this just so he could teach Min Hyuk a lesson. We then see a flashback as Mr. Cha was being hung. He was still defiant, and he said that he is doing all this just so he could teach Min Hyuk that there are a few things in this world to which money has no worth when put into comparison. Kim Min Hyuk then continues on with his monologue. He says that Mr. Suk needs to understand that there are things in this world which are impossible to do, even if you are someone who is capable of coming back to life. He says this to taunt Mr. Suk. Mr. Suk hears this and feels shocked knowing that Min Hyuk is aware of his abilities. However, he then starts laughing as he slowly starts to get back to his feet. Mr. Suk then grabs a hold of Kim Min Hyuk, which triggers Secretary Jo. However, Min Hyuk signs her to not get involved. Mr. Suk then tells Min Hyuk that he is now interested in what he said, and that he would love to know if there are things that are impossible to do even if one is capable of coming back to life. Mr. Suk then says that after he wakes back up, Min Hyuk is going to see something that's absolutely outrageous from then onwards. A few moments later, we see the lifeless carcass of Mr. Suk on the ground, in a pool of his own blood. Secretary Jo goes to check up on him, and she checks up on the back of his neck to find that there's no nerves on him, and that he has well and truly passed away. Secretary Jo then asks Kim Min Hyuk just what should they do with Sukwan's body and think about the cleanup procedure, but we see in the background that Min Hyuk is clutching onto his chest, and he is having difficulty to talk or even move around properly. Secretary Jo notices this, and she quickly goes forward to help out Min Hyuk. We see that Min Hyuk's heart rate has gone up and hit 128, and this serious thumping is causing the issues. Secretary Jo then gives him some medicine pills, and after taking those pills, Min Hyuk finally calms down. Secretary Jo then tells Min Hyuk to take care of his health and take medicines properly. Min Hyuk says that all is well, and that it was just a minor inconvenience caused by him getting a little too excited for his own good. Min Hyuk then tells Secretary Jo tell the people who are managing the hotel to leave this all on its own, and not change anything. He also wants them to install cameras in the room so that they can see how and if Sukwan reincarnates. Min Hyuk then says that he is excited, and he knows how it will go down. Later on, we see that Mr. Suk suddenly wakes up, and he is back to life. However, he is back to life in his own bedroom. After coming back to his senses, Mr. Suk realizes that it was the first time he had lost his life in a while, and then he realized what Min Hyuk had done to him, and so he gets mad and decides to prove to Min Hyuk that he messed with the wrong guy, and that he will show him just how overpowered he is because he can come back to life. Saying this, Mr. Suk goes to grab on to a wrench. However, his head starts spinning and hurting at that very moment. His eyes get foggy and blurry. Mr. Suk wonders just what is happening with him as he feels constant discomfort. We then see that Mr. Suk's eye turns red for a slight moment, but it goes back to normal immediately. Mr. Suk wonders just what this weird sensation was. Mr. Suk then checks the date to see that 3 days had already passed, as is accustomed to his revival. Mr. Suk decides that he should go and check on Cha Yeren first before doing anything else. Mr. Suk then runs out of his apartment room. Kim Min Hyuk and Secretary Jo sees all this live from the CCTV camera, and Secretary Jo says that it's unbelievable how someone she finished off is back to life all of a sudden. Min Hyuk then tells Secretary Jo to change the camera to the hotel room and rewind the footage, so that they can see when exactly did Sukwan come back to life. Meanwhile, we see that Mr. Suk has gone to see Cha Yeren, who is seen burning off the belongings of her deceased father in front of fire. Yeren gets emotional seeing Mr. Suk, and she tells him that her father is now gone forever. On the other hand, Kim Min Hyuk and Secretary Jo check the footage of the hotel room to find out just how Sukwan revived him, and they get shocked seeing how it all went down. Kim Min Hyuk says that it's really creepy and unbelievable how Sukwan came back to life in this manner, while he has a curious look on his face. We then see the footage they were checking. In the footage, we see that Mr. Suk's body is laid out lifeless and his blood surrounds him. However, suddenly, his body just disappears in thin air, leaving nothing behind except for his blood. Secretary Jo says that she has no idea how that happened, and that it's unbelievable how Sukwan's corpse just disappeared into nothingness. Kim Min Hyuk says that the mystery and supernatural aspect of it is not important enough for them to ponder upon now. Instead, it's more important for them to believe in this supernatural phenomenon. and try to figure out every which way that it could potentially benefit them moving into the future. Kim Min-hyuk says that this is the only way that they should think about it, and he says that with a freakish smirk on his face. The scene then changes, and we see that Mr. Suk and Cha Yerin are standing in front of the graveyard where Cha Hyung-suk was buried. Cha Yerin then remembers something, and he asks Mr. Suk that he did promise her that he would be back right away. However, he came back after 3 entire days, so why did it take so long? Mr. Suk is taken aback by this question, and he doesn't really know what to say in reply, but Cha Yerin understands that he is uncomfortable, and she changes the topic by saying she is very thankful towards Mr. Suk for bringing her here, as she had never had the courage to visit a graveyard before. Yerin further goes on to say that if it weren't for the old man, while referring to Mr. Suk, that she wouldn't be able to do anything. Mr. Suk is overwhelmed by hearing all this. Later on, we see that Mr. Suk and Cha Yerin are walking back slowly from the graveyard, both saddened. As the uncanny silence is too much for him to handle, Mr. Suk speaks up to break the ice and asks Cha Yerin just what her plan is with her life going forward, because after all, she is just a minor kid who is in high school, so what is she going to do with her life? Cha Yerin replies to this by saying that she is just 1 more year away from graduation, and that after graduation she will be just fine, as she will get herself a part-time job. She then further adds to this by saying that she will be going to college after she is done with high school, and there, she will get the teacher certification and then she will start being a school teacher. Yerin then hopes to meet someone who loves her and values her more than his job. Then they will get married and they will buy a house with a front yard. She also adds that she wants a son and a daughter too. Mr. Suk is taken aback by all this information, and he ends up telling Cha Yerin that she doesn't have to go into such intricate details. Cha Yerin says that this was the imagination of her for her. She then smiles, but sadness paints over her face, as she says that it's funny how her father had such a detailed life planned out for her. She then goes on to say that she still can't believe that such a person would end up taking his own life. Cha Yerin then suddenly grabs Mr. Suk's arm and stops. This shocks Mr. Suk, but Yerin goes on ahead to say that there is something that she needs Mr. Suk to help her with. She continues further, saying that her father must have definitely seeked out and gone after the people of the company that did him wrong. She says that Mr. Suk most definitely knows them, and he also knows that those people are bad, and that they also control gangsters and use them when needed. Yerin says that only Mr. Suk can help her with this, but she wants him to help her find the people who did all these things to her family, help her track down the company that caused all these issues for her dad and her. She wants him to help her get the revenge for her father. Hearing all this, Mr. Suk is at a loss for words because everything that Kim Min-hyuk had told him comes back to him, all the things he had said to him about how he has so much power, and how he can use that power to end people like he ended Cha Hyung-suk, and how he had told him to stay out of this or else it would cause them even more problems going ahead. And so to protect Cha Yerin, Mr. Suk tells her to forget about it and move on.